Hello, friends. I'm Su. Um, Today, I'm not going to say something nice about China. Um, Actually, I'm going to expose something um, that happened to my hometown, that happened to my parents' house. Um, that's also where I lived for at least 20 years. Um, It's in my hometown, Wuhu. That's a city by the Yangtze River. Now the local government wants to demolish our house, but they cannot reach agreement with my parents regarding the price. Um, so what they did is they tried all kind of harassment to intimidate my parents. And recently, last month, um, February 28th, 2025, and that was the Chinese New Year's Eve. And what the local government did was they set a fire. They set a fire by the backyard of my house, and the fire turned very big. And here I will show you a video which was filmed by my mother.
张家山东11栋拆迁办外面的垃圾失火了，两栋红楼之间，这烧得很厉害，已经烧了大概至少有20分钟了。垃圾在这之前我叫打过多少次电话，要求把清理掉。去年夏天就开始有垃圾，一直不清理，现在失火了，浓烟滚滚，还看不到消防车过来，也不知道是怎么回事。消防车过来，水头一喷，把垃圾一清理，不就完了吗？首先把火灭了，你看火势现在还变小了一点，再烧树就要烧着了。芜湖市张家山东11栋和9栋白楼和红楼之间拆迁办所在的地方今天失火了，我都吓坏了，打了所有电话打不通，还是打110打通了。所有座机忙，大年30失火，从来没有过的。现在火小了一点，刚才了20分钟之前，太吓人了。垃圾真的不能随便丢、随便放、随便堆，这一定是放炮仗，然后或者甩个烟头过来啊，都能引起失火。我都在之前我都说过无数次，没有用啊。哦，现在好像底下看到了消防人员。
It has to be noted that they choose the date of Chinese New Year's Eve because that's a time during which everyone was off work, and it's even hard to call ambulance or firefighters, etc. And it's also easy to blame the incident on someone else. They can pretend that the fire was caused by fireworks or something, but there was no fireworks at all by my house or near my house. It was a man-made arson. It was deliberately set on fire. They also choose to set the fire in front of the backyard of my house because there was a tree and bamboos in between. So even if we had the surveillance cameras, it would be difficult to catch who's really setting the fire. If they did this in front of my house, it would be easy to record. So they can always say, "Oh well, this incident, we had nothing to do with it. You shouldn't frame us. You shouldn't blame the incident on us or something." But everyone knows it is them who did that because they had the record of doing that before. About 2 years or 3 years ago, they already did that because the problem about my parents' house is that this area has been under development for many years now, and every time they come to demolish certain areas of houses, and it took a very long time, probably like 5 or 6 years, to demolish all the houses in the whole area. So there was incident before, about more than 2 years ago. They sent the local government sent the local thugs to cut water and electricity of my parents' house. Oh, by the way, about 15 years ago, in my area, there was another incident. And it was also about house demolishment. And the local government cannot reach agreement with a local old couple. So when the old couple was not in their house, was walking somewhere, and they burned, the government sent the thugs to burn the house down completely. And everyone saw it and knew it. And I am exposing all of this not to show you that how dark China is, how terrible, how China is like a hell or something. I mean, that's probably some Western propaganda will show you. I will just show you the truth. Is where I grew up. It's an old house built in the 1950s. And the truth is, China itself is fighting against this shit as well. China itself is fighting against these corrupted officials from local government as well. Because about the things I mentioned more than 2 years ago, it was eventually found out that the several officials in the local government of Wuhu were found guilty, and they were found out by the corresponding department that they were corrupted, and they took a certain amount of public money, which was allocated by the central government to them to pay to local people for the demolishment of the house. These officials, they took some of this money. So what happened was one of these officials actually gets sentenced 10 years in prison. And another person who was a boss from a construction developing company was also found guilty and was sentenced 5 years in prison. And several other people involved also get prison sentences. Because what you see in the case of my parents' house is a very interesting case. On the one hand, some of these corrupted local government officials try to pay not enough to my parents, and on the other hand, do some shit harassment, trying to intimidate my parents to give up. On the other hand, some other agencies and departments also connected to the government, but from a different discipline, and also in some case, polices, they were also involved, but they were kind of helping my parents, and they put flyers on the walls of my house and to warn the local thugs hired by the demolished department of government, and warn them about the consequences of doing this shit. And also my parents were posting videos on Chinese TikTok to show the records of this shit happened. It can also have some influence and have some warning effect to the local government who were hiring thugs to do shit. But sometimes some stupid people, they just don't learn. Their predecessors already did the shit and was already sent to prison, and they are doing the same shit, and they probably wouldn't regret until they are in prison as well. And here is something I want to say about the Chinese government. On the one hand, there's a system, a dual system, which on the one side is central government high above, and on the other hand, local government, which in small cities and in relatively poor areas are quite corrupted, but in developed cities, big cities and provinces are doing well with the people actually. But I must say I'm very dissatisfied with how they pick up the officials for the government in modern China. Because in my videos, I talked a lot about the national exam that choose Chinese officials for the government in the ancient times. And the problem is in the modern time, nowadays, for example, they cancelled that exam system. The exam system they do have now is a very shitty exam system. It doesn't pick up any talents. It's just a very bureaucratic, stupid exam. And whether you will be chosen or not, eventually is not dependent on that exam. It's depending on whether you have background. If your father is someone in the government already. This is why I'm saying, this is why I was saying in my previous video, the difference between totalitarianism in the East and in the West, that China cannot completely overcome the residues of the disadvantages of a totalitarianism system. And the fact that many of its local government officials are garbage, are sons of bitches, are the consequence of these residues of the disadvantages of totalitarian system. But traditional Chinese political culture somehow survives. And there's always a struggle in between. If you want to evaluate if Chinese government is doing good jobs or bad jobs, you have to look at different areas, different provinces and different cities. And even in the same city, you have to look at different departments, different fields, and different individuals. When I talk about demolishment by force, it makes more sense to talk about it about 20 years ago, or even earlier than that, because that was the time during which demolition houses can benefit the government a lot, actually. Because the Chinese house rent economy was started in 2000, and it was designed by Goldman Sachs. It was 100% designed by Goldman Sachs, which was an American Wall Street investment bank. And here I want to share some background knowledge. In 1979, the Chinese Central Bank was separated from the Chinese Fiscal Department and become a relatively independent institution. In 1994 or 1995, China started a policy called the double tax system. It means the most fiscal income from the local government goes to the central government. And the local government in China became very poor. It's also the year during which China started to annex Chinese RMB to US dollars. This design was intended to make Chinese economy the vessel to America. It's also intended to make Chinese RMB the endorsement for the US dollars. When the local government of China became very poor, and they had to think of all the ways and also at the same time to follow American suggestions to make money. And that's the time they created, that's the time they start to sell land. Not really sell, but to rent land. To be precise, to lease land to the house developers, to the construction developers, to create a huge amount of income to the local government. And this goes hand in hand with China letting the foreign companies, industries enter China and build factories. But you have to know that this design was not designed by China. It was designed by America, because America wants to move factories, industries to China, to hire Chinese slave workers, slave laborers, to create cheap goods for American people. That's how America designed. And in the year 2000, Goldman Sachs designed a full set of plans of super housing rent economy for China. And China accepted it 100%. And that's a time when Chinese house bubble start to grow from the beginning, actually. And that's also the time all Chinese financial institutions, including the central banks, started to be step by step penetrated by America, by the Wall Street. And this super house rent economy eventually drained the wealth of Chinese society, and makes the gap between poor and rich very high. On the other hand, it makes the super rich Chinese own a huge amount of US dollars. And they refuse to spend this money, to invest this money on Chinese actual economy. And the Chinese government didn't tax these super rich at all. According to the statistics in 2012, the income created by the interest of capital in China already reaches 80% of Chinese GDP. And the income created by labor was only 20% of Chinese GDP. But the funny thing is, the government only tax this 20% labor income, and they didn't tax this 80% GDP capital interest income at all. And this capital income keeps flowing to America with the assistance of Wall Street investing banks. It was called money laundering because this whole process was illegal. Wall Street investing banks have been helping Chinese super rich do this kind of money laundering from China to America in the past 20 years. They open the bank account in Hong Kong or Singapore and let these super rich in China transfer money through those places. And the total amount of this money laundering from China to America, which is still flowing in America, is estimatedly $5 trillion. So when I'm talking about the corrupted local Chinese government officials who's taking advantages of Chinese people, who's being corrupted during the house demolishment, I'm actually talking about the Chinese traitors, because these officials, they are Chinese traitors. They are not working for China at all. They are American puppets. When they get this corrupted money, they do all the money laundering to America with the assistance of American investing banks. And let me tell you something. It's precisely these corrupted local Chinese government officials who brag about the West every day. They brag on social media, on official media, which are controlled by them, and even in academia, every day, about how civilized, how great US is, the West is, everything. And they also spread the propaganda of how the savage, how stupid and underdeveloped Chinese are and China is. It's not me who brags about the West and demonize China. I actually brag about China and blame the West every time I have chance. It is corrupted communist officials who brag about the West every fucking day. Do you see my point here? Do you see the logic here? Because when you see how the West try to portray Chinese government, some Chinese government officials as their enemies or something, well, they're not their enemies at all. They are best friends ever, actually. And let me tell you another funny story. When I was in the Netherlands, when I was in Leiden, I once joined a PhD group of Chinese students. I was very shocked to see that the managers of that group always like to teach Chinese people lessons, or teach you to do this or that, to dictate this, dictate that, to behave nice or something. And they always worship white Dutch people. And one day I said something very bad about Dutch people. I just gave my honest opinions. And these Chinese managers became very angry, become extremely outrageous, and they kicked me out of the group permanently. And for these Chinese people, insulting their white daddy is more offensive than insulting themselves. And I can guarantee you that all the Chinese managers I mentioned above were sons and daughters of corrupted Chinese officials or the super rich, and in many cases with a background of housing development. Um, Another funny thing is these Chinese white suckers, they came through racism themselves every day when they are in Europe, actually, but they never talk about it. They never complain about it. I fight against Dutch racists every day, and I complain about them all the time to my Dutch friends. And the funny thing is, even my Dutch friends can accept what I said. They agree with me that there's a certain degree of racism in the Netherlands, and they see it by themselves, and they have to be honest with me. And this is how they become my friends. I never say that any country people are 100% bad or something. And I have to say that most local people were bad in the Netherlands. But some people were nice. And even I had a Dutch girlfriend before, and she's very nice. There's one thing about me as a person which shows my personality, which is that I refuse to suck up to anyone in my life. And if I respect you, I respect you, no matter who you are. And if I despise you, I don't give a fuck about you, no matter who you are. Um, I remember that in one or two, probably in one or two of my previous videos, because I was criticizing the West, there was a white person from the West automatically replied to me, assuming that, oh, you are with the Chinese government, oh, Chinese paid you to do that or something. But these kind of people, they're just so pathetic and projecting because they cannot live without a tribal identity. They think that anyone else is the same as them. If you're familiar with my other videos, you would know that I criticize modernity as a whole. I criticize modernity created by the West as a whole. And I talk a lot about Chinese internal struggles within China. And it's very complicated. And I always miss the old times of ancient China because that was the best civilization ever. Okay, let me recap to the topic I started in the beginning. It's about this demolishment problems my parents had with China. My parents still have with the local Chinese government. It's actually very stupid for the individual officials in the local government to do this kind of shit because now is the time that housing development doesn't make money. It cannot create benefits at all because Chinese housing bubbles has popped up about 2 years ago. China already built too many houses, far more than its population. It cannot sell those houses because people cannot afford to buy. And the house price is still going down and down. And that's a good thing, by the way, because any economy built on super house rent economy is destined to ruin itself. And Hong Kong was an example, Japan was an example, and America is a living example. Its whole economy is going to collapse. America is doomed to collapse, and US dollars is presumably going to collapse before the end of this year, actually. And for China, it is now the best window time for huge reform actually. Because when US dollar is going to collapse, there will be a huge amount of flowing capitals flowing from America back to China. It will be the best chance for China to make the financial reform, economic reform, and tax reform. If Chinese government cannot finish it, then Chinese people will finish it. Okay, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you next time. Bye.